a lot of people that voted for Donald Trump are disappointed, and a lot of Trump voters feel betrayed, and rightfully so. I mean, the guy didn't get government spending under control. He's continued the large deficits, but the biggest betrayal by far is this new war with Iran. You know, Trump continuously campaigned on no new wars, no unnecessary wars, and the Democrats are now acting like, oh, well, you're so stupid if you voted for Trump. And the Democrats, they're so wise and their political insight was so great and they have the moral high ground. And we told you so. Trump is so awful. And yes, Trump is absolutely awful. But you know what? Trump is the result of just how bad the Obama administration and Biden administration were. Because think about it. Trump was what voters went with after dealing with Obama. You know, Obama's economic recovery was completely fake. It was non-existent. It completely relied on artificially low interest rates from the Federal Reserve and government stimulus. And Trump called that out when he was running in 2016. You know, but Trump got in and then he backtracked and did the same thing. He didn't fix anything. The economy didn't change under him. And then let's look at Obama's war history. You know, started a war with Libya, turned that into a failed state, bombing Pakistan, Syria. We've now turned Syria over to Al Qaeda, Yemen. And I did a video on this just the other day. I was talking about how they're both the war party. You know, Republicans and Democrats alike. They're both the uniparty. They represent the war party. And one of the people in the comments said, yeah, well, Obama gave us the JCPOA, which that's the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the original Iran treaty, or not treaty, but an agreement for the nuclear deal. And okay, so Obama gave you the JCPOA. That was a non-binding agreement. It wasn't like a treaty ratified by the Senate. It was easily undone, and that's exactly what Trump did when he came in his first term. So that's what we get. So Trump's first term, he comes in. The economy's, we don't have a real recovery under Trump in the first term either. His deficits exploded. Then you had Trump was the one that started the COVID lockdowns, and you had the CARES Act, which that was one of the reasons for a lot of the inflation during the Biden administration. But Biden comes in. Biden continues the authoritarian COVID lockdowns, makes them worse. He wanted to suppress free speech. He continues the deficit spending. The Biden administration says, oh, well, they're cutting the deficit. Yeah, dude, you are cutting the deficit coming off the largest deficit in history. If you went back just a couple more years, then you tripled the deficit. So Biden was trying to say, oh, well, we're reducing the deficit. No, that was very misleading. Then Biden starts a proxy war with the one of the largest nuclear powers in the world, second to us, to the United States, starts a proxy war with Russia through the Ukraine, which that war really started during the Obama administration with our support for the Ukrainian nationalists during the Maidan coup. And then, you know, Biden supported Israel wiping out Gaza. He had wide open borders, pushing DEI, ESG. And then Harris became the nominee for the Democrats without even having a primary. Not a single vote to make Harris the Democratic nominee. And basically, it was a hostile takeover by the Democrat Party. They ousted Biden because he could barely even get through a sentence. And, you know, that was the choice. The choice was word salad Kamala Harris or Donald Trump, who, if you look at what was going on at the time, you had the Democrats. They kept pushing the Russiagate hoax about Trump being Putin's puppet, which that's completely false. That was a whole conspiracy in itself. You had the lawfare that they were pushing against Donald Trump, all the lawsuits in New York, and Donald Trump runs a hell of a campaign. He runs, you know, he goes through the Rogan podcast, Theo Vaughn, and I mean, I got to say, Donald Trump deserves, you know, an Academy Award or an Oscar or something, because what an actor. To go on to these podcasts and be able to be that, you know, come off as that authentic, but really just so disingenuous. You know, he's so fake. It was just all a lie. I mean, he's a great salesman. You know, that's how he got where he is in life. The guy's a great salesman. And part of that sales pitch was Donald Trump conceding that during his first administration, mistakes were made. And he pointed to things specifically like John Bolton being brought into his administration and Donald Trump says, John Bolton, the guy's a nut job, never should have had people like that around me. And things like that make people like me go, oh, well, maybe Donald Trump was misled. Maybe he was just a political novice and didn't know what he was getting into. And a lot of us that ended up voting for Donald Trump, that's what we were looking at. It was like, okay, we're going to either get the continuation of the terrible Biden administration, or let's just roll the dice, go with Donald Trump, and see what we got. Now, yes, we could have voted for Chase Oliver, the Libertarian candidate, but he was an awful pick for the Libertarian candidacy. I really wish it could have been somebody that I could have supported. But he was just a weak candidate, and it was basically Trump or Harris. So roll the dice, go with Donald Trump. But guess what? We voted for Trump with, hesitancy, and we want to hold him accountable, right? It was less than a week. One of the first videos I made right after Trump was elected, I was talking about his pick, Pete Hegseth, for Secretary of Defense. And I was saying, hey, this is not a good sign. Putting people like this, people like Hegseth, Marco Rubio, Mike Waltz, like these were all warning signs. But we're not going to sit there and keep defending Trump. So when we're outraged about the things Donald Trump is doing, don't forget it was the Democrats and the leftist media that up until mid-2024, they were saying Biden is sharp as a tack. Remember that? Biden's sharp as a tack. He's going to be a great choice to, run against Donald Trump. Give me a break. But the Democrats they still defend Obama. They still defend Biden and all the authoritarian things that they did. And yes, Trump's doing the same thing. They're all in on it. And the thing that just frustrates me is the Democrats are so hypocritical. And look, I know not all of them are. And there are some progressives that are consistently honest and principled. And I can respect those types of liberals. There's a progressive liberal guy, Jimmy Dore. I love his show. And he has consistently called out Joe Biden. He consistently calls out Donald Trump. He calls out Obama. He calls them all out. Okay, and like I said, Jimmy Dore is a progressive liberal. I don't agree with him on everything, but he's honest. Okay, and I don't mean he's a progressive liberal like he wants to trans your kids. I just mean he wants, free health care and things like that. And I can understand how people on the left look at that because they look at the money that we spent. Donald Trump's calling for $1.5 trillion for the military budget, and they say, well, how do we have money for that, but we don't have money for health care? We don't have money for either one of those things. We're coming up on $40 trillion of debt, But the point that I was getting to, Jimmy Dore made a solid defense for people that voted for Trump. And here, it's a short. I'm going to play it for you here.
Iran has American blood on their hands, okay? And what we saw in terms of just this attack on Israel, 200 ballistic missiles, what we need to do to ensure that Iran never achieves the ability to be a nuclear power.
MAGA is abandoning Trump and they feel betrayed. I go out on tour and I talk to a lot of MAGA people. I would say half my audience were former Trump voters, they're disaffected Republicans and disaffected Democrats. And when I tell people that these former Republicans, they feel betrayed, they go, well, how stupid could you be? You think you're going to trust a con man? Well, who the hell were they supposed to vote for? Here's Kamala Harris and the Democrats doing the exact same goddamn thing, and they're just as in bed with Israel, as you pointed out, with Chuck Schumer at the tippy top of the party. And now they're going to run a bunch of Zionists who are also in the pocket, including Gavin Newsom, by the way, who came out in strongly support of Zionism. It does drive me crazy when I see people say that, oh, they're so stupid, the Trump voters, that they voted for Trump. Well, what the hell were they supposed to vote for? Here's Kamala Harris doing the exact same thing. At least Trump was saying the opposite when he was campaigning. I don't know if you remember when Mondale was running against Reagan and they had a debate, and Mondale said, we're both going to raise your taxes. I'm going to tell you he's going to lie to you about it. Well, if I'm going to vote for the guy who says he's not, that's exactly the same thing that played out here. You know, the Democrats were in the middle of doing a genocide in Gaza, and they had started a proxy war with the nuclear power, Russia, and Trump was saying we don't need to do that stuff. So it's not like we had a choice. It drives me nuts to hear people try to insult and criticize people who voted for Trump in that way. Like, they're so stupid. What did you think was going to happen? Well, what the did you think was going to happen?
So, see, I think Jimmy Dore did a great job, defending people that, voted for Donald Trump. And the problem with the people that voted for Donald Trump are the ones that are still acting like this is good. Like, oh, MAGA, MAGA still supports Donald Trump. No, that whole thing is just dissolved. The coalition that got Donald Trump elected, that's over. But your Ben Shapiro's, your Mark Levin, Steven Crowder's, all these guys that are still acting like this is what Donald Trump campaigned on. No, he's a liar. Okay, he has betrayed anyone that voted for him, and the longer that these, the Republicans continue to say like, oh yeah, let's stick with Trump, keep supporting Trump, you're the same people that said Biden was sharp as a tack. That's who you are now. So you are paving the way for the Democrats to come back in 2028. And after all the unconstitutional things that Donald Trump is doing, and you're defending that, you are setting you're rolling out the red carpet to just an outright authoritarian socialist to come in. And I don't even, I'm worried what that looks like. And did you see in the clip Jimmy Dore played that I referenced that the other day? That was from Kamala Harris, where she was talking about Iran. See, we were going to get this war in Iran, whether Harris or Trump won. It didn't matter. If it was Harris, the propaganda would have been just a little bit different. It would have been, we saw the humanitarian outrage with the protesters in Iran being killed by the regime earlier this year. And that's what I think how it would have been pushed. Because when the Democrats push wars, it's usually from the humanitarian, it's like, oh, look, we have to go in there and be defenders of these poor people that are being, oppressed by the regime. And that's what they would have focused on. Whereas with Trump, it's the strength, we got to prevent them from getting nukes. And even Harris said in that interview, she said, oh, we can't let them get nukes. But either way, I'm tired of the hypocrisy. Yes, I voted for Donald Trump. It was a mistake, but I'm not going to defend it when he does things that he campaigned against. Okay? So just let's all be honest. Okay? Don't defend the authoritarian things when a Democrat does them. Thank you for listening. Please like, subscribe, and comment.